Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new installment of the Brownfield Braintrust Podcast, where we find solutions for environmentally distressed properties that are underutilized. Today, we have a special guest in Don Kellar, MS, REG, PG. Don is the Executive Vice President at Fulcrum, a Blue and Associates firm. He's a professional geologist as well as a general A and well drilling contractor. He specializes in assessment and remediation of environmentally contaminated sites, as well as hazardous waste management and compliance. Over the course of his 20-year career, Don has been directly involved with the assessment, remediation, and closure of hundreds of locations and has personally conducted environmental due diligence on over 10,000 properties. We can't continue. 10,000 is not enough. Uh,
Now I know we're having fun with this podcast.
I forgot to mention what we're going to discuss today before I go into more in your background. So today we're going to discuss self-certifying, or if you don't like that term, as many attorneys do not, self-directed remediation projects. So doing a brownfields remediation project without agency involvement. So back to Don. So Fulcrum was founded by Don and his wife, Ling Kao, and they built a minority and woman-owned business organically. When dealing with environmental contamination, team members assist a variety of clients, investors, attorneys, small business owners, lenders, and brokers from initial due diligence to identifying any problems before they invest in properties. So Fulcrum's goal is to help solve environmental issues so that properties not only make a profit, but also protect the environment. And to make things even more interesting, Don and Ling sold Fulcrum to Blue Associates. So now it's Fulcrum, a Blue Associates firm, Blue and Associates firm. Welcome, Don, and to the Brownfield Braintrust Podcast.
Welcome, Matthew, or Matt, as they say. It's
Um,
good to have known you the last what is it now, 25 years or something
yeah,
like
I think
that?
that's about right. Yeah, Don was came here straight out of University of Michigan and is working with a colleague of ours. And even though he's a U of M grad, I still do business with him. I went to
They're in a building
University
there.
of Illinois versus University of Michigan here. So let's just talk about it before we go into self-certification or self-directed cleanups. Walk us through a typical environmental project you and Blue Associates take on.
Sure. So yeah, Blue in itself, let me back up a little bit. So Blue and Associates in itself is it's a family-owned business that's been around since the late 1890s. So that's very rare. At least in my world that I've seen in other companies, and they started as a survey company. So like going back to the rod and chains survey days. And since then, that was primarily what they did. I think they're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, survey company within the entire country.
Mm.
And about a little bit before we were acquired, they were looking to add on services. Um, they already did different services. They did LiDAR, they did like different Alta surveys, different types of construction services, but they were looking to get into the assessment and cleanup era. So typically, a typical transaction will consist of a wide range of survey, zoning, the environmental due diligence piece, which is the phase one, property condition assessment, and also a seismic and or green energy. So me personally, I tend to fall under the expertise of anything on the environmental realm. So that can be anything from upfront due diligence, consulting, obviously further assessment or initial assessment, then onto the cleanup phase and also closure. We've done this across different states actually too, not just in California. We've done it. I think I've done it in 12 other states in my 25-year career today.
But Blue Associates is nationwide, isn't it? I mean, I think they have an office in just about every state.
Correct. Yes. Yes. They
Okay.
actually are nationwide.
So it sounds like you do a lot of due diligence for property transactions outside of the environmental realm. We're going to stick to environmental and narrow it down even more to environmental assessment and remediation when there's subsurface contaminants. Mostly, we're going to be talking about volatile organic compounds, PCE, TCE, benzene, gas stations like the one pictured behind me, dry cleaners, refineries, tank farms. Um, and here in California, it's become difficult to get these coveted no further action letters. So, can you talk to the audience a bit, Don, about what a no further action letter is and how many have been issued in 24 and 25?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, typically a no further action letter will be issued from an overseeing regulatory authority. The most common ones that you'll see statewide are going to be Department of Toxic Substance Control, DTSC, or the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I think there's 9 regions throughout the state.
Sounds right.
And there's also CUPA agencies that are more local, like the local fire departments, that can also issue closures. But typically, the main ones you're going to see, like the Regional Water Quality Control Board, their main goal is to protect water. So you're going to see them oversee any sort of groundwater contamination, but they also get involved with soil vapor and also the DTSC.
And so trivia, do you remember what CUPA stands for?
Ugh, why do you got to go there, man?
I think it was, it came out like 15 years ago. It's like Certified Unified Program Agency. Wasn't that it?
I think so, yeah. And a lot of counties don't even do that anymore, right? They're kind of going away with it. So
a lot of things are being deferred to the Water Board and DTSC, and there are only maybe a dozen remaining CUPAs that are actively overseeing sites statewide, something like that. Don't quote me on the number.
Correct, yeah. And they also get involved with USC closures too.
Of course.
Yeah, so that's yeah. Generally, if there's what I've seen with any sort of contamination, especially when it stems from, say, like a tank pull. I mean, I know that's a whole other topic and a whole other tangent we can go on. But typically, if they want zeros, and they will issue a closure from the CUPA if they have the budget for a environmental geologist to actually do the oversight. If they don't, then they generally will defer it to the water board. So it becomes an open case.
So if it's reported. So let's talk about closing of cases in 24, 25, the past 2 years. The year's almost done. And maybe 5 years ago, 2019 to 2020, how did the rates of NFA issuance compare?
Yeah, it's very, very heartbreaking statistic. And I think I can speak for a lot of other consultants or consulting firms that do attempt to try to help their customers. But before 2019, it was much more reasonable to get closure, especially related to soil vapor. It was a much more reasonable number. The action level was more realistic compared to now. I mean, Matt, I could go back to even 2022 to now. I think I've gotten one case closure, and that's strictly because it was it involved other contaminants. It recorded like excavations, more of metals. Soil vapor was more like a subcomponent.
Mm-hmm.
But here in California for 2024 and 2025, that's how many I've gotten.
Is it zero? Okay. So
it's zero for me. And so, we're working on about 24 active cases, either the DTSC or water board
at any given time.
Correct. And not all of them are, we're trying to get low threat closure now, but some of them we have been, because we see it as those levels. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but our methodology of cleanup, whether it involves soil vapor extraction, that's one of the most common. We've seen levels where they've actually leveled out. We've proven it's not a human health concern, and we've proven it's not a groundwater threat. And also it's not a threat to, say, like offsite properties or any sort of positive receptors that are going offsite. Mm-hmm. We still can't get it because they're going for that, that magic ESL number.
Let's talk about that. So we've got an environmental screening limit, or ESL number, and that is now, for sake of discussion, if you're commercial and you're a former dry cleaner facility, I think it's 67 micrograms per cubic meter for PCE, just by way
PCE, correct.
By way of example. And you used to be able to, and it's not supposed to be a closure criteria, but unfortunately, we haven't seen closures very often, especially in Southern California, with concentrations above that.
Correct. Yeah. It's and for all due discussion, and I'm gonna go there, Matt, but it's a pie in the sky number, especially in these urban areas or heavy industrial areas. Call it areas of Los Angeles, right? We do a lot of work in Vernon, Commerce, Maywood, Santa Fe Springs, up in the Bay Area. We'll do a lot of work in Foster City, Oakland, parts of San Francisco. Every other block, or every block for that matter, there's, say, dry cleaners or different operations that may have used or use PCE. So it's very hard to pinpoint and say, delineate the plume to below 67. A lot of times the agencies want you to do that. And
you just can't find that number, no matter
very,
how far you go laterally or vertically.
It's very, very difficult to do. The only way that I've been able to do it personally is, again, you have kind of a baseline to where there's zero. So if it's a very rural area where they absolutely don't use any PCE, say in the countryside somewhere, it's a little, then maybe you can do that, right?
Then you can go laterally offsite and hit a 0 point.
Correct. Yeah. It's a lot easier to do. But generally, in our experience, when we're assessing these sites, you'll get a mixed match of data, and it could range, anywhere from, say like 100 to like 1,000, right? Does that mean sites actually say contaminated? Mm-hmm. So that's very, that's kind of where I'm going with it. And
so that's our dilemma.
I've had countless discussions with the different case managers. They seem to be very robotic and stoic on that topic, where you have to further delineate it. And just kind of like to your point, that is not a closure or cleanup criteria. That is a criteria to see if you have a human health concern or a vapor intrusion risk. That's not a subsurface.
Yeah. And so this all came from, the recent edition is the February 2023 Vapor Intrusion Guidance put up by Cal EPA, DTSC, and the state board. And so that's where we're getting these
Matt, can you hear me?
from.
I can't.
Yes.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, okay. Let me turn it up. So let's talk about this guidance document here in California that has been put in final draft form 2023 February. And it basically says there's these environmental screening limits. They are guides to determine if you need to do more work. But what we're finding in reality is agency officials are calling these screening limits final cleanup goals. And it's been difficult to work around that. So here we are. We're not seeing any NFAs. Deals aren't being done. And in the case where agency notifications are made, so your clients and people who buy sites are in a bit of a catch-22. We want to clean up sites, yet the 2023 Soil Vapor Screening Guidance document put up by Cal EPA and the Water Board and DTSC are giving us these environmental screening limits that cannot be achieved in practice and are much too conservative. So we've also been told by various regulators that these ESLs, such as that 67 micrograms per cubic meter for PCE for commercial industrial, are screening limits, and they're not remediation goals. But in practice, they've been used as remediation goals. So we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. So, Don, you've come up with an approach that is called either self-certification or self-directed remediation for sites in California. Maybe tell us in general what that means.
Yeah. So, I'll start with, a lot of times when I get involved on sites, right? I can't tell you how many times that I'll hear it, but whether it's real estate brokers, lenders, buyers, seller, people that maybe it's their first time buying or selling, they come to me and say, Don, I need you to take a look at this. The site is contaminated, or it appears to be, right? So I actually look at it, and it'll be another, say, like, consultant. And trust me, I have to start from this spirit or from this point to kind of get to where we're talking about the self-directed cleanup. Mm-hmm. Because many times on these sites, it'll be the same very cookie cutter basic scope, where it'll be, say, 4 subslab soil vapor, right? And I get it, because they want to do the initial phase 2, try to get the work, but you get into this never ending cycle of doing another phase 2, another phase 2, another phase 2. And it's usually the buyer and the seller either splitting the cost or one's paying for it. And then you go down this road of trying to chase, let's call it PCE and benzene. Those are like the 2 most common contaminants that I see. And when I look at another consultant's report, let's say for all purposes, the levels are 500 microgram per meter of PCE, right? Okay. As you say, the ESL 67, they just compare it black and white. Yes, that would call for a further assessment, but generally our goal is we'll do one more round of assessment, right? We try to anyways, to go lateral, deeper, show it's not a bigger issue. And we also do indoor air sampling and or site-specific attenuation factor, because the 67 is actually derived from a state default attenuation factor, as we know.
Well, let's talk about that. So attenuation factor is defined as the number that you multiply the subsurface vapor concentration by to project what indoor air concentrations would be.
That's
So,
correct.
so if you have a attenuation factor of 0.03, which seems to be the default the agencies are working at, they're saying 3% of the concentration that's in the soil vapor is going to get inside. And there's been all sorts of studies that say that's really conservative. It's probably 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 kind of
That's
numbers
correct.
as opposed to 3 in 100. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so when we do our own site-specific attenuation, which I truly believe, again, putting on the nerd hats here, Matt, being scientists, right? But that is going to get you a more accurate site-specific. That's why it's called site-specific. It's going to give you a more property-specific attenuation factor if you're using that, even if you don't do the indoor air sampling model, right? If you do site-specific, what I'm seeing is just like you said, 1,000 to 10,000, even more. 0.001 to 0.00, I've seen 4 or 5 zeros. So it's 2 orders of magnitude, even less conservative, depending on, generally that's derived from soil like lithology, geology. There could be, permeability of the concrete. There's all kinds of factors where that would apply, moisture.
And then when you take that direct measurement, it takes into account any cracks in the concrete or preferential pathways because you're taking actual indoor air samples.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll do, again, to exhaust this, right, so where we're getting to self-directed cleanup. So let's say we do a second round of assessment, right? We go vertical, we go lateral. We're not seeing any major spikes, right? It's generally around that same area. Let's say, I think I said 500 before. Let's assume it's a range between 500 and 1,500, right? All across the site. Yeah, there may be a little bit more, but really that 1,500, in my opinion, you can't really say, oh, that's where a hot spot is, right? Unless it's trending higher in a certain direction, lateral or deeper, that's the reason why we do it. But if it's just kind of all over the place around the site and it's not increasing with depth, it's not increasing in a certain area, maybe or maybe not, it's trending in an off-site area. Maybe it's, and as long as it's not spiking, say near like a sewer line or a septic or showing that they're not doing any sort of like illegal dumping. And you get a site-specific attenuation factor, which models out that your human health concern is going to be eliminated, and you get empirical data from the indoor air. You can rule that out, in my opinion. Now you're focused on really the subsurface issue. So if you have clean indoor air or human health concern, right? You've already eliminated that. Now we're focused on showing that it's not a threat to, say, groundwater. This range of contaminants, 500 to 1,500, it's not some threat to groundwater. If, within a reasonable scope, right? Let me use 2 different examples here for like sake of argument. Let's say we're doing a site in Santa Barbara, right? And groundwater is 5 feet or 10 feet, right? Or even let's say it's less than 25 feet. Probably not a bad idea to get some, say, like groundwater samples, right? Maybe 2 down gradient, 1 up gradient, show that groundwater hasn't been impacted. Because we have to be cognizant of the clients that are generally doing this work, right? These aren't Fortune 500 or RCRA 90, these giant RCRA sites from the 1990s. These are first-time property buyers. So we're trying to find a box to place this risk. That's how I say it. So if, again, we get groundwater data, we've got sufficient soil vapor data that's lateral and vertical. We've got human health data. If we can do that, then I think that's a case where you can do self-directed cleanup, right? I think that would be perfect for that sort of candidate.
So in that case, you don't make agency notification, you just put in systems or do a health risk?
I would do like a temporary, like mobile system, right? Generally, because again, you're talking soil vapor. For our listeners, maybe they're technical, maybe they're not, but soil vapor contamination is basically contamination of the porous or the air between grains of, say, soil. So that's really what you're targeting. So as long as it's not, it's a lot of times it gets trapped in the spores. So use the most common method that we'll use is soil vapor extraction. We'll generally do like a temporary system. It's not permanent. It's not it's much easier to mobilize, and we would apply it over a certain amount of time to where we can achieve these goals. So if we can do that and also calculate how much mass that we've taken out to show, and we'll actually get to a more couple specific sites that I've done. But if we can show that, okay, we took out this many pounds of mass, it shows that it's actually working. And that's where I think we can say in our final, call it remediation report or phase 2 report, like whatever you want to say, we can issue a no further action, right? And
but
then
you're doing it as the consultant. You're not
correct.
Okay.
Correct. Now, where it can get a little more different, and there's a different matter of opinion, right? That was a very, you might not see sites like that all the time. Again, each site is different. Concentrations are different always. So if it's a little more challenging, and again, this is where the risk tolerance on a lender may fluctuate on the needle, right? Let's say groundwater is deeper. Let's say you're in Pasadena, not far from here. Groundwater might be over 200 feet, right? How much is enough to go vertical to delineate soil vapor, right? That's where like the question is, right? Do you go out and you go down to 25 feet? Do you keep chasing it with like a sonic rig or like a hollow stem auger rig and spend $100,000 to chase 10,000, parts per billion PCE?
When you could be extracting it and getting it out.
Exactly. Right. So where I look at it is it's kind of how it's trending. If it's definitely getting worse, or if it's in a hotspot, you've got an obvious hotspot on your site, right? And all of the isocons, or as we say, ISO concentration lines show, and it's plainly obvious. Let's say it's near a clarifier or near a point of where there was maybe a subsurface conduit. That's where we would, then it's clear as day there was probably like an on-site release. That would not be a candidate for like self-directed cleanup, if that actually makes sense. But
it does. So you're saying if there's still a source, the concentrations are higher, you get some spiked indoor air concentrations, you're making an agency notification.
Correct. Or even if the indoor air isn't, or I'm saying even if the indoor air is safe, right? Well, let's say that it is safe. Okay, at least you can occupy it, but you've got an issue. You've got probably an on-site release. That would not be a great candidate for it. But the other times I'll see it though is, let's say it's just a warehouse facility, right? Another example is you got a warehouse in downtown Oakland or something, right? And every other, these buildings are either like adjoined to each other, or there's very, very dense like industrial area. You go out and test there, and let's say your soil vapor concentrations, assuming soil is clean, they're between 10 and 20,000 micrograms.
Okay, let me stop you there. So you're saying assuming soil's clean, so you've grabbed soil matrix analyses and they're not exactly close to it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's like I said, you definitely have to cover yourself with data. That's like the key before we go down the self-directed method. You've got to show that groundwater's not impacted, soil's not impacted, and indoor air is not of real concern. But even if indoor air is not of concern, and you've got an issue where it looks like there's an on-site like release, we already covered that. But if it's not, right, and again, it's just kind of sporadic around the site, you've got ranges from 10,000 to let's say 50,000 microgram per meter PCE. But there's no clear evidence that it shows there's an on-site release. It's kind of just every like which way, right? And if you go, if you go on the northeast, southwest side of your property, you got all these industrial sites around there. You really can't pinpoint it's coming from an offsite source. And then again, it comes down to how much are you willing, for these guys to spend? Do you go offsite and get like an access agreement? Do you go out in the street and get it like an encroachment permit? Do you get hollow stem or mud rotary or sonic rigs to go down? It could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars just to assess, when, just like you said, if there's no clear sign or evidence that it's an on-site release, that's been my approach.
So what would you do in that instance where, again, recapping for the listeners, there's no soil matrix problems, there's no evidence of release from the site of concern, but you still got 50,000 micrograms per cubic meter of PCE and soil vapor 5-foot samples. What are you going to do there?
Right. We would probably just target a temporary system probably in that area, and then hit it and then show that the concentrations are reducing over time. So it may take a month, it may take 6 months, it may take a year, right? But as long as we're applying the system and it's showing that there has been an actual reduction, and then really what's key, Matt, is that we do rebound testing. We show that the vapors are not coming back after a given time, right? I know me as a buyer, I'd probably want to see that. Or if I'm representing a buyer, I'm going to want to see that, right? I understand. So all these things have to make sense and fit. But assuming that they do, which we've been able to do on a lot of these sites, we can get a large group of lenders now. Like before, it was actually harder to get lenders on these sorts of sites, but there are a lot of lenders out there that will be fine with this, assuming that the consultant on a self-directed cleanup would write no further action.
Okay. So, and let's talk about that same example, which you've run into with the 50,000 micrograms per cubic meter. You put in a soil vapor extraction system at your own guidance without agency notification. It rebounds a bit, and then you extract some more, and you might need some sort of liner,
something, yeah. You need some sort of
vapor intrusion mitigation system or engineering control, but that's still going to be quicker than taking 2 years to convince your neighbor to get rid of the source.
That is 100% right, especially in those areas, because everyone's going to be afraid that, now you're basically opening up Pandora's box, right? You're basically knocking on doors, you're getting attorneys involved. Instead of cleaning up the site, you're going down this wormhole of paying not only assessment fees, which are ludicrous on other industrial sites. Again, this is assuming the same example I just given you, right?
Yes.
But you could get attorneys involved, their attorney fees, you start suing, you start getting the agency involved. And let's not also forget here, Matt, that once you get the regulatory agency involved, say on a voluntary cleanup program, you got cost recovery. That's a tax in itself on top of, and that could be, I just saw a site right now where, a guy's paying over $20,000 a year. That's just for some arbitrary.
My partners and I bought a former refinery property in Southern California, and that oversight. Now, we have LA Water Board oversight, and we're very happy with that relationship, and they're doing a great job. But it is costing us about $80,000 a year for the water board to oversee our data, and they're working hard. So, but we'll get it done. But that's just an example of when you need oversight. But back to not needing oversight, and it's the point taken that there's going to be fees for a Coupa, DTSC, or a water board to review your data and provide guidance, and maybe that's money you can put into the.
That's 100% right. Yeah, this is and like I said, certain lenders, they may not like this approach. We tend to butt heads on it. The lenders I see this more on are going to be more your national institutional lenders. They're going to tend to be more on the scale of zero risk. They want absolute zero risk. And unfortunately, the environmental climate that we're in now, not to be confused with the environment, but the environmental nuances and politics within California, it's going to be hard to make them happy and get closure from an agency. It's just, so then it comes down to maybe they don't lend on these sorts of sites, or they've got to have that actual closure, right? They've got to have that closure. And it's very, very, very difficult to get. I would like to say sites that we have been able to get closure on tend to be more on the sites where, say, you have heavy metal like contamination or
without volatile organics. It's that simple.
Yeah. Sites where there's it's just a simple dig and haul or excavation. I've done it even with some PFAS that are involved, metals.
Heavy and hydrocarbons that don't have VOCs. Well, let's talk about the banks for a moment, because so many deals require some sort of bank debt to make them viable transactions. And you've mentioned that you've seen a trend of bankers accepting self-certification today versus 5 or 10 years ago. Talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, I would say, again, before the vapor intrusion, or I should say before the vapor guidance, the new one was established. I mean, we were doing more loans with the bigger national institutional banks, I would say, on all kinds of sites. What I've seen now, though, is because these banks are, and it's not even just on the environmental. From what I'm hearing, it's different things. It's cash flow, it's the liquidity of the borrower, their assets. All these things kind of come into play. they're just really tough on getting an approval. So what's happening is I'm seeing a lot more, call it non-traditional banks, or they call themselves non-bank lenders, right? And I wouldn't say that they're hard money lenders, but they're just much more competitive to where their risk tolerance is not going to be as it's basically not going to be as high. And a lot of these bigger banks, the national institution banks, I know because you were in the consulting firm before too, they're going to have their own in-house, say like someone like me that's going to review every report that comes in, and they're going to either approve it or not, right? Or maybe they might want a phase 2, or they're going to want another phase 2. The point is it's going to be much harder for them to get the approval across versus a non-bank lender where they're just looking to us, right?
Right. And what I think the difference is, you've got the banks that will accept the fact that they may have to take ownership of a site someday, and they say to themselves, well, can we take on this risk? And then there's other banks that say there's no way in heck we're going to take on ownership, take title to a site that doesn't have an agency closure letter. So though that fine difference has opened up the door to non-bank lenders who will accept self-certified projects as long as the data is good.
Correct. Yeah. And then also, and also to your point, I mean, they look at other factors. They may look at credit. They're going to look at, how much equities in the building. Is the guy just doing, say, like a refi and pulling a little bit out versus, trying to sell, or there's another purchase. There's so many other factors that come into play. But as it pertains just to self-directed cleanup, like I was saying before, if we can check all those boxes, and really the main point is that we've got to show that it's not apparent, or it doesn't look like that it's an on-site release. If you've got vapor there and it's above 67 or above, I think 2 for, say, like benzene, right? Those are the most common ones that I see. Most of the other vapor concerns, a little bit of like TCE, but it's always the same two, PCE and benzene, that I usually see. 95% of the phase 2s that I always come across. So again, as long as you check the box, it's not an on-site cleanup or an on-site release that has or had occurred. You've got sufficient data showing that it's not vertically migrating, so it's not in groundwater, or you've got evidence that shows that vapor levels are not increasing laterally or vertically. You can show that there's not an off-site concern, because that could also be a big liability. You don't have any human health concern. Generally, we'll get site-specific attenuation factor with the indoor air. So you've got two sets of data of evidence there.
Well, it sounds like you're covering your bases. A little bit more on phase 1. So it sounds, and I'm going to put words in your mouth. You're telling me if I'm doing it correctly. So if you run into a former dry cleaner facility, and the fact that it used to be a dry cleaner or used to store PCE, is that in itself a recognized environmental condition that needs a phase 2?
If it's on your site or
on your site,
yes. There's really no way to get around that. Yeah, I mean, now, again, there's always the argument, and we've done this a long time, right? People will say, "Oh, it was always a drop off," or or "Oh, it was only used for a year or two," or they only
or they got rid of PCE 30 years ago.
Yeah. It was the eco friendly solvents. I've heard it all. Right? I've heard it all. So it's anything they can do to around, but generally not every single time, but I would say 99% of the time it's gonna be a phase 2.
Okay. So I'm gonna summarize a bit, and you tell me if I hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
We talked about phase 1s, and it seems like if you get 5 different consultants, you get 5 different phase 1 conclusions. So you have to get people who are in the know to do these phase 1s for your transactions. Is that a decent summary of?
I would say, I mean, there are some great firms out there, right? But you want to have the firms that really have an understanding of, again, risk tolerance, and know the typical client that you're working with.
Okay.
Where I will say, if a bank will engage the phase 1, then generally the consultant can only communicate with a bank, right?
Okay.
Versus, say, if it's like a borrower engaged, you may consult with everybody that's involved: the brokers, the attorneys, the borrowers. There's a lot more people that are involved, and if it has to go to a phase 2, right? Generally, it's going to be a buyer and a seller. They're going to be paying for it. sometimes, and that's so you like to have those conversations, or at least I would if I'm a buyer or a seller that's never had an environmental issue. I think we kind of take it for granted sometimes that we've done this so long that it's just, we do it like every, like every couple of minutes. Whereas I have to kind of stop, take a step back, and sometimes remember some of these guys are a first time buyer of, say, like a commercial property or even a multifamily apartment or a seller. They don't know, they've never been down it. So they may need their handheld on the process of going to a phase two versus.
I think what I'm hearing is that as I choose phase one's consultants for the brownfields I buy, I just want to make sure they don't have an itchy finger to make agency notifications prematurely.
Yes.
And the other lesson I got from this discussion is that not every site that has a volatile organic compound exceeding the environmental screening limit needs to be reported to an environmental agency.
That's 100% right. Yes, it's 100% right. And any consultant that wants to really take that approach, and like, again, maybe it's years of experience or how they interpret it, but when there's an actual issue on the site, like say like the data is going to prove it, right? If it's coming together with the isocons and there's a bullseye on your site and you got a million microgram per meter PC, you've probably got an issue, right? I'm not saying that you don't have to do it on every site. It's just you really have to assess the data and see how it's trending. And if you do them enough, you may just be in a general area where there's high PC everywhere, and you're not going to get that number below 67. So if there are consultants that are pushing for that to open up a case, you better have a second opinion on it.
And I will always say that your second opinion should come from an experienced environmental attorney who can guide you appropriately.
Absolutely.
Another lesson I gathered from this conversation, there's no shame in removing contaminant sources as quickly as possible. Because sometimes that just gets dragged out and it's 5 years from your phase one or your first phase two that you're actually removing contaminants. You're espousing to get rid of these sources from the soil vapor.
That's 100% right.
Or put in a vapor intrusion mitigation system or both.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, like the days of, I see it where there'd be a consultant that has one client or two clients where they're doing cleanup for, right? You think they have motivation to clean it up quick? Right? They want to have an annuity. I mean, I'm going to come out and say it. I mean, it's just, that's the dark truth of it. I'm not saying every case is like that, but it seems to make sense. Whereas over my years, I've lived more in more in like a transactional world. I have more interest in getting these sites. You're not going to get zero. Like you're just not going to get a zero risk. You're going to have low risk. And that's the goal. What's the likelihood that the agency or say like a property neighbor is going to come by and say, yep, I think you were contaminating the site 40 years ago. If you've got sufficient data, the likelihood of that happening is, as long as we can express that and explain that, that's really what my goal is here. And yes, we're in this business to ultimately clean up the environment. Right. So I think if a site is just barely above 67, is it really harming the environment or harming human health? I mean, that's really the step we got to look back here and, try to convince the regulatory agencies, because if I'm not mistaken, Matt, these ESLs are based off of, I should say the 0.03 is based off a radon study, not even in California in the 90s, right?
It's based on screening studies done indoor air quality versus subsurface outside of California with varying architecture that didn't really account for the architecture and the climate here in California. So there were very few California data points.
Right. So like, again, that's where I think touching on the site specific attenuation, I think that's such a key data set, because that's giving you real data and, a little bit of marketing, a little bit more marketing on, but we've probably got over 250 sites all throughout California, mainly Bay Area and Southern California, a little bit in center, but we've got probably over 250 data set points. And I can guarantee you that none of them are close to 0.03.
So when you're comparing subsurface vapor and indoor air.
Correct.
And I think you said it's maybe closer to between 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 10,000.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, there may be a couple outliers, but the data set's going to show that it's going to be in there. It's going to be in that range.
Wonderful. So if people want to talk about data some more with you, and I'm sure everyone has vapor intrusion on their mind now, how can they get a hold of you? Cell and email.
Cell, same thing. Most people have it 310-876-4128. You can
Mm-hmm.
also contact the main office. They're very good at transferring you to me. You can contact the Blue. So Blue's headquarters is out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. And my office here in Southern California is in Monrovia, California. So if there's people around the country listening, Monrovia is about 10 miles just northeast of downtown LA, just east
And
of
so,
Pasadena.
so what's the Blue Associates general number?
Oh, I don't. It's still a new acquisition, man.
Oh, we're gonna keep this we're gonna keep this in the podcast. Do you know your email address, Don?
Yeah, I got that. So it's Don dot, and then Kellar, Kellar at blueinc.com. BLEW, yes, BLEWINC.com. So I'm going to say it one more time. DON.KELLAR at BLEWINC.com.
Wonderful. So we've learned a lot today about self-certifications. If our listeners have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of Don Kellar. It's been enlightening.
It has been.
I now have a little more hope for the prospective sites I look at because they're all exceeding ESLs.
Every one of them. Every
right.
one of them.
Take care, everyone, with your brownfields, and happy holidays.
All right.